When I was young, every fight my parents ever had was about money. We didn't have a lot growing up. And as I got older, I believed that if I became rich, all my problems would go away. So I put all my effort into making money. I've been working in accounting since I was 17 years old, starting with a traineeship while studying. Now I'm 35 and I run my own accounting business. But in the last 5 years, I realized that I've been so consumed by my business and making money that I forgot that freedom and happiness was what I was really after. And building a business was supposed to give me that freedom. So I then switched my goals to using my business in a way that would help me effectively retire at 40 years old and not have my life decisions be dictated by always needing to make money. The reason I'm sharing this story is because I've seen a lot of business owners make the same mistake. They become so focused on running their business and making money that it becomes their only income stream. And they don't think about leveraging their business to be able to grow their wealth. In this deep dive, I'm sharing the numbers behind my own business and investing journey and my game plan for retiring at 40 to demonstrate ways you can leverage your business's future income to invest in assets today. I'll be getting into some technical details, so if you're not sure how things like bucket companies or SMSFs work, I will leave a link to my previous deep dives below so you can catch up. Let's dive right in. First things first, retirement doesn't mean that I'm going to sell the business and literally stop working. What it means is I just want to do things that I love with the people I love. Still running an accounting business because I really enjoy working with the team, but not in the viewpoint of always constantly making money. It's about like helping others, helping my team grow and start families and spending time with my family and, growing a family as well. And I actually asked ChatGPT to produce a timeline of like my 18-year-old life till now. And just excuse the typo issues. I don't know why ChatGPT is a computer and it makes mistakes like this, like cash flow. I can't believe it spelled it wrong. But I only gave it like 30 seconds to do this, so did a pretty good job. Because we're talking about like retirement, investing, all I can really give you guys is like context of what I've done and what I'm trying to achieve, and take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a investing guru. I'm not like a money expert. I'm just some accountant who started a business and who has hopes and dreams of hoping to retire before 40. I'm close to there, but I have to admit, by the time when I was reaching like my 30s, close to my 30s, I didn't think I was going to be there. I wasn't depressed, but I was just more upset at the fact that I had all these goals of being like a millionaire before 30, and I had all these goals of not worrying about money. And I didn't think at 30, I was even close to that point. So let me explain. When I was 15, my mum and dad had sat me in a room, my dad especially, and he said to me that, Davie, we're not doing well and we need you to work. And I know that studies is really important, but we need you to make money for us because we can't work anymore. The conversation went for like half an hour, and my dad actually told me a lot of stories about what was going on in the family. And at that time when I was 15, I didn't really know what was going on. But after that chat, it kind of hit me that, holy crap, like our family isn't doing well at all. And so I decided at a very young age that I'm going to do what it takes to, provide for the family. So when I turned 18, I had no experience. Well, 17, 18, I had no experience, and I started a job in accounting. And I realized I needed to build experience and skills to, actually survive in this world. So from 18 all the way to 23, all I was doing is finding a network, finding skills, finding a industry to work in. And I started multiple businesses. And when I was 23, I started an e-commerce business selling Polaroid and films, quick money, sold like Fuji films just to make quick money. And then I started like a e-commerce business in selling animal onesies. Yeah, so pajamas and all that stuff like that. So I did that for a little while. And I think I closed it down when I was 24, 25, because it was making money, but there were just some issues I was having in life that I just decided that I just wanted to focus on one thing and one thing only. And that was my career in accounting. So I I think I was about 28 when I started reinvesting all that money into the business that I currently own now. So, no, sorry, 26. 26 was when I started Box Advisory Services. It wasn't making that much money, but when I was in 28, I started making a good amount of profit that I started reinvesting all the profits into the business to grow it even more. I wanted to build a cash flow generating business. And the reason why I want to build a cash flow generating business is that I realized from learning from my clients and learning from uh, being an accountant that you need money to make money. So just want to point that out again. You need money to make money. It's just the fact of life. Banks use money to borrow against it. You need money to be able to like invest in wages and invest in employees, buy assets. And so if I was making $100,000 to $200,000 as a wage or just working for myself, I knew that it wasn't enough for me to, hit the goals of being able to solve those money issues that my parents were going through. And so I just made as much profit as I could. And then every single year I would go, okay, I made $200,000. My turnover was this amount. I'm going to reinvest basically everything I have back into hiring employees, buying assets. But most of it was literally from 28 to 30 was all about growing my business. So I just put everything into the business. I took like a modest salary of like $50,000, $60,000. Sometimes I would take the salary just for tax purposes, but leave the profits actually in the business and leave the wages in the business for it to grow more. And there was one point where one of my employees, Joel, who was working for me, was getting paid more than me for like a whole year. I didn't tell him that because he'll probably freak out. But yeah, he was getting paid heaps more than me. His salary was probably double the salary that I had. And yeah, we just grew the business as much as we could. And when I was turned 30, like I think this was like in 2020, I bought my first home. Pulled the money out of the business, bought my first home. And then 31, I bought my first commercial property. And then 33, I bought my second property. And now 33 to 35, I'm actually reinvesting a lot of money into the second property. Where we knocked it down and we're developing it. But I've also, when I'm 35 now, restructured my property ownerships. So what I mean by that is I'm trying to transfer my commercial property into my SMSF, and I'm looking at ways to, release more equity to be able to buy more and invest more. So that's my property journey and my investment journey. When it comes to crypto, I did try some things with crypto. I did try some things with shares. And but I've realized that what I'm really good at and what has worked for me is, reinvesting all my profits into a cash flow generating business, and then, buying property and set and forgetting with property and being able to use leverage with property. So that's just my journey for the last, 10 years of my life right now. And I want to explain that because I want people to know that it hasn't been that easy. Like, a lot of people say to me that, what should I do? And sometimes the first thing you should be doing is building the necessary skills and network to be able to get the right skills to make money. And then after that, you need to build a cash flow generating business. A lot of businesses come to me and they say, Davie, I want to invest, but they don't have any profits or not enough money to be able to pull out to invest. So you got to understand that there are some steps that you need to make before you get to that certain point. So I started thinking about what things that you guys should know before we continue. We've done these deep dives. There's 20 of them now. So we've done like every fortnight for the last whole year. We've done 20 deep dives. And we've learned many things. And some of the things that we learned was how to leverage using finance, structuring your businesses, your investments, and looking at the different tax rates for entities. We also looked at how to build a business and make profit. We looked at SMSFs and retirements. And we also looked at drawing money out of the company and how does it impact your business and, Division 7A loans and all that stuff like that. I'm going to be talking about all of that in this deep dive. So if you don't understand it, feel free to go back to the videos that we've released on YouTube and just research more about those topics if you're not sure. But those topics there help you understand what I'm trying to achieve before I'm 40. And
I'm 5 years to that 40 mark. And at that point of time, I want to make sure I have the options to be able to choose what I want to do. So a lot of people ask me, retirement before 40, what the hell would you going to do? That's what my wife said to me too. It's like, what are you going to do when you're 40 if you retire? I said to her that I'm probably going to still work, but I'm just not working for money anymore. So when I retire, I just want to just focus on doing things I love with the people I love. And right now, the box team is like family to me. So I just want to make sure that I help them as much as I can, and not always focusing on just making money, making profits, because at a certain point, like I just want to see my team members grow, and I want to see like times where they have to go through difficult times, and I could just go, you know what, it's with Steve, I would take a month off. I'll pay for the whole thing, and just focus on your family and your kid, and come back, and let's build this business together. I want to be able to have those options to be able to do things like that. But right now, the business isn't that profitable where we can just like help the team as much as we can. And I like, corporate businesses do this because of the whole work-life balance. And I want to be able to achieve that with Box. And I also want to see like the Box team buy their own houses, invest in, grow their own businesses one day as well. So that's like my goal. And if I didn't have the money to be able to like look after my family, then I won't be able to do things like that. So I'm already starting to do things like that already, but not as much as I want to. Anyway, let's talk about the steps of retirement. So let me just quickly share to you guys what my goals are, my end game plan for you guys. As I mentioned, there are like a few steps of getting to retirement for me. The first step for me is to build the necessary skills and expertise. Try different things, find out what you're good at, and if you don't love it at the very start, doesn't mean that you won't love it right now. So for example, I've been doing accounting for 17 years. Trust me, I didn't like accounting at the very start. Also, in the middle of accounting, 7 years in, I also hated it at one point. But over time, I started realizing that I could do a lot more things with accounting, and I could change the things that I didn't like. And I started really enjoying accounting. So I started getting really good at it, but also really loving the fact that I can help others. And so accounting is like I've got this love-hate relationship. Reason why I tell you guys this is because you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes your passion might be something that you might hate at one point of your life, and you just got to stick through it. And a lot of the kids these days don't think that way. But eventually, after you find the necessary skills and expertise, your next step should be building a cash flow generating business, which is this beautiful looking thing. So for me, this is Box Advisory Services. But you need a cash flow generating business, because if you don't have a cash flow generating business, and it doesn't have to be a business, it could be a system, it could be some sort of like passive income entity that is investing in property or whatever it is, or it could be crypto, whatever it is. But it needs to be some sort of investment. It needs to give you some sort of cash flow. That's the main thing that you need. It doesn't have to be business. It could be like, entity, whatever it is. Okay. You need this to be able to multiply your investments. And I think what I realized over time is that business owners, they make all this profit and they grow their business. But if the business isn't generating any cash flow for them, they only just paying themselves money. They really just what you call self-employed. They're not really running a business. So I think there's a difference between self-employed person versus an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is a person that runs a business that grows year on year, and like you're working on the business rather than working in it. A self-employed person just works in it and just gets paid. And their clients and are basically their bosses. Whereas a business, the clients are still important, but the thing is that clients, if you don't think the client is a good client, then you can just remove them and find other clients. And there's a marketing machine that just generates more income, more leads and more clients for you. So it's like an actual legitimate business. And so I think what you first need to do, and I've already spoke about this a lot in the other deep dives, is that you need to build some sort of cash flow generating business. And cash flow generating business is talking about, like, if you were to throw a number at it, anywhere after wages, paying yourself a wage, is anywhere 200K plus in profits. And if you can get 200K plus in profits, then that's where the banks are very interested with you. If you're, making $200,000 overall in terms of income, including your profit and your salary, you could borrow, but you probably can't borrow much. And the thing with banks is that banks usually have this formula where they lend you 6 times your income. And this is talking about like family income and family profits or whatever it is. So if you're making 200K plus your wage, say 100K, then that's where we're talking, because this is 300K in terms of income, times that by 6 is that they're willing to lend you about 1.8 mil. And if you're living in Sydney, this is where you can, purchase your investment property or purchase a property that is worth buying that could, make you profits, because it's a blue chip area and you don't have to think too much about it. If you're spending above above the median property median property prices, then you're most likely finding something that is quite good, and that could increase in prices. Obviously, you got to do your research, but buying something that is above the median house prices is usually some good area as well. So you can find that it's sought after and it's a blue chip area that the prices would probably increase. And so the goal for me is to once you start using leverage to buy, and then borrowing the funds off the business, I'm able to start investing in something called a bucket company and SMSF. My goal is to move my assets into a bucket company. So if I do have assets in my personal name, but my goal now is not to use my personal name anymore, because the problem with my personal name is that my personal name, so personal taxes, is taxed at 47% because my income is too high. Yes, I can invest using that my personal name, but every dollar that I'm making, or if I ever sell the investment, or if I'm making like passive income from the investment, I'm losing close to 50% of it. Yes, there is a discount. Yes, there's capital gains discount of 50%. But in the end, if I'm like generating like rental income or like dividends, I won't be able to access that 50% discount. So it's just not beneficial for me, because I'm not planning to sell my properties or investments anytime soon. I want it to be long-term or short-term, long-term or medium-term game. So it's better for me to have these in these investment structures first. So a bucket company being taxed at 30% and a super fund being taxed at 15%. That's where I would prefer to have my assets rather than in my personal name, which is a tax rate of 47%. So what I'm going to be doing now is, if I still have assets in my personal name, eventually one day is going to be a good time for me to sell them or restructure them and then move them over to a bucket company and SMSF. And I'll keep my assets in a bucket company for the short to medium term. So why short to medium term? Is because I can't access my super fund until I'm 60 years old. And I can access this anytime from, say 40 to 60. So my game plan, which is actually to have my bucket companies to start investing and pay 30% tax on any future profits, but have this supplement my retirement and pay me dividends at a 30% franked dividend. So if you've done the deep dive about like drawing money out, you understand about the franked dividends, but I'll be able to pay myself a dividend that has a franking credit of 30%. That I can just use until I'm 60 years old. And then when 60 comes, I can start using my super fund. Firstly, it's good to have money in your super fund because the tax is 15%. It's the lowest tax rate you can get in Australia. Yes, people are saying to me that investing in your super fund is a bad idea because of that 3 million rule. But right now, all I need is up to about $3 million in my super fund. Each, by the way, my husband and wife, they both have 3 mil. So that's $6 million in my SMSF. But even if I have 6 mil, I don't think I need $6 million for the next 20 to 40 years of my life. Like, I would have a bucket company to supplement me, where I can take some profits out, and pension from the SMSF, which is tax free. So my goal is have a commercial property here that I've recently purchased a few years ago, and that say that the commercial property is worth 1.5 mil, right? And then over time, this one's going to grow, and let's just say it grows at 5% per year. It's just going to constantly keep growing at a very fast rate. And then eventually, when I get to, I don't know how to do the maths on this, but let's just say that this is like, year one, and then plus 1, and then drag this out to when I'm, to say 20 years later, you can see that the value of the property will be worth like $4 million in 20 years. So from $4 million, I can just, sorry, actually, I'm going to bring this back here. So say it's $4 million in 20 years, okay? So when it's $4 million in 20 years, what I would do then is just like put it out there. I'm going to probably sell the business by then. I don't think I'm going to work for that long, but let's just say that there's a 5% rental yield on $4 million. I'll get rental income of 200K. So I'll take that 200K and just use that as my pension once I'm 60. So that there is technically, once it goes into pension mode, this super fund, the tax is 0%. So I pay no tax on this 200K, and I'm able to take a 200K rental rent between me and my wife. So I can live off that. Also, this bucket company I would probably most likely use this to buy more property. And sometimes people will have multiple bucket companies for multiple investments. But I'll also buy shares in it, and ETFs, and possibly some crypto as well. And the reason why I'll do that is because, you got to diversify. Property investment's great, but there are times where you can't borrow anymore because of the cash flow generating business. So, my business is generating quite a fair bit of cash flow and profit. And don't quote me on this, is not real at all. I'm just saying, let's just say there's $500,000 in profit a year. So if there's $500,000 profit a year, I can then technically borrow up to 6 times. So I can borrow $3 million. So I would go to the bank and borrow $3 million in property. And because I'm making $500K a year, I just need to save 2 years and I'll have $1 million, right? $1 million. And this is like, obviously you got to pay taxes, but assume all the taxes being paid, I technically could buy a property, multiple properties at the total value of $4 million. So if I then went and bought $4 million of property here, as long as my 500K can service the loans, which should be okay because the 6 times multiple is based on a rule that the banks have said that I can afford it. And I'm not a big spender. I don't go buy Lamborghinis or expensive things. All I do is just make the profits and then use the profits to pay for my loans and help my investments grow. That $4 million over the next 5-10 years can grow. And if you look at ChatGPT and if you ask ChatGPT like the average growth rate of a property, let's see, I think I did it here. It's about 67%. So say 67% overall in every different state, depending on where you want to go. And this is the last 10 years actually. So that 4 mil, it's actually a higher growth rate. So say it's 6%, and I do 4 mil. Start with 4 mil here. That 4 mil in say 20 years times will be $10 million. So I just need to be able to keep this cash flow business and make sure that this cash flow business can generate 500K profit every single year. I know it sounds like everyone's going to say, especially people online, it's like, oh yeah, let's just find me a business that makes 500K. Obviously it takes time. And like I said before, it's taken me 15 years to get to this certain point because I've worked my butt off to be able to build the skills and build the business to be able to do what I can do now. But now I feel very comfortable in being able to generate a business that has cash flow. Not exactly 500K, but could be more. You never know. But the goal is I can now buy properties worth $4 million. And being able to buy $4 million, as long as I can service the loan, this property in 20 years' time would go to $10 million. And then what would happen is my loan over 20 years will be like, will dwindle down or will be higher. I don't know if depending on if I buy more property. And as a result, I'll have $10 million here with a loan. And remember, I started with a loan. I started with a loan of 3 mil. So technically, say I don't even pay down the loan at all, and the loan stays the same the whole way, I would still have $7 million in net assets in 20 years' time. And then here, I think the SMSF would also grow in 20 years' time on a 1 point something million dollar property, and I'll have 4 mil in here too. So as a result, like, that's my game plan. I don't need to invest into multiple assets, multiple properties all over Australia because my borrowing capacity is not high enough. What my goal is to generate as much cash flow as I can, build a business that makes me money first, and then go for an asset that's in a blue chip area. And it could be based in Sydney because I can afford it. Whereas a lot of people, that their income isn't as high, then they have to start off lower. So when I was being an accountant, I realized the ones that didn't jump into the property game that quick, they still made a lot of money at the end of the investment journey. And the reason being is because they wanted to build a cash flow business first that could go to the bank and then borrow as much as they could. But sometimes if you go too early to investing and buying property, you only have like a wage income of say 100K to 200K. And yes, you can buy, but you reach a certain point. So say that your total income is $200,000. You reach a certain point where you only can borrow, and say that your savings is 300K. You reach a limit, and then you only can borrow up to 1.2 mil, and you buy your family home, and then done. You're stuck. You can't do anything else. And so what I realized is that you actually need to start increasing your income. And if you can break that barrier of like a limit on how much you can earn on a yearly basis, where you can go over about 500K, I think 500K is a sweet spot for a family. If you can generate about 500K, you can then buy good assets in blue chip areas, and then you can start then your investment journey at a head start. That's how I see it. And because you can buy assets that are just worth something, in a good location, as opposed to somewhere in WA. And there's nothing wrong with buying in WA and Brisbane and all that stuff like that. Nothing wrong with it at all. It's just that I don't know those areas, and I just don't want to spend my time, looking for a property because I don't know those areas. My goal plan is just, I've seen what's grown in Sydney, and I know which areas have grown over the last 10 years. And so those are the areas I'm just going to look at, because if you wait 10, 20 years, they're going to just double in prices anyway. So that's how my game plan is, and when it comes to growth. And what my game plan is and where I'm going to invest all my assets. So bucket company and SMSF, and then I can start taking dividends when I'm 40 to 60 years old. I may not, because don't forget, I'm still having a cash flow generating business. So the cash flow generating business could pay me wages and dividends as well. But if it can't, because it's too busy paying for this loan and the loan repayments on this bucket company, then I would just wait for the bucket company to generate enough profits then I can take a dividend off the bucket company instead. So that's my game plan. And that over time, a lot of business owners, I think where they struggle is that they're so good at running their business, or they get so fixated on running their business, they don't think about actually taking money out or using leverage to be able to invest. And they need to diversify. And what I realized over time is that you can actually do this by, borrowing money. Okay, so here's another example. And it's funny because this example is actually something very similar to what I did. And I did a few things with this that I'll add on top. But say that you've been running a business for 3 years now, 3 to 5 years, and you've generated some profits in the business, and there's about 200K in retained profits. So it's just sitting in the bank, the tax has been paid, and it's just sitting there. It's not really doing anything for you. You paid a tax of 25%, and you've also paid yourself a wage over time, but you spent the wages because you just had groceries and all that you had to pay for. So what I did in my situation is when I was 30, just about 30, I needed to, like I was thinking of getting married. And for me, I wanted a property because I'm Asian. My parents always tell me to buy a home. They think that, buying a home is the dream and stuff like that. I think that was kind of like a mistake. I should have probably rent vested for a little bit, but it's up to you guys what you want to do. But I took the 200K from the trading company, borrowed it from the company, took up technically a Division 7A loan, and then used that $200,000 to borrow to make up about $1 million and bought a property for $1 million. Okay, this is 5 years ago. So nowadays you can't do something like that. It's very hard with $1 million. You might not be able to find a property worth $1 million in New South Wales, but you can do it in different states, or you can, try to increase the budget a bit by, taking more and waiting a bit longer, or increase your profit more. So I went to the bank. I had $200,000 of profits as well, like a recurring income, and I was able to borrow $800K as a result of that. So if you said $200,000 times that by 6, I was able to borrow 1.2. I actually borrowed, I went to the bank and borrowed 800. Okay, so this is the part where it's a bit different. I actually borrowed the full amount of 1 mil. So I didn't borrow the 200. I actually left the 200K in my bank, and I didn't give the 200K to the seller. There was a reason why I did that, and I'll explain why. I put the deposit down. It was technically it was only 5% or something like that. But anyway, just say the deposit was 0. I was able to borrow the full amount. I got one of my parents to personal guarantee it. You may not have that the opportunity, but I was able to do that. And I left $200,000 in the bank. And what I did with that 200K was I renovated the property. I tried to create more value on that property. So this property, when I purchased it, you couldn't live in it. It was not a livable state. It was the windows were broken. The bathroom was really bad, and everything about it was not livable, to the point where the banks actually didn't even allow some parts of rental income. Sometimes you can use rental income to increase your borrowing capacity. The banks didn't even allow that. So basically, I left that 200K to renovate that property. So technically, the whole property value was $1.2 million. So I spent about 6 months to renovate that property. And then after I renovated that property, remember, I still took 200K out of the bank, and I owe the company 200K. So now I needed to either pay that money back, or I need to take up a dividend in my personal name to pay the taxes. I've already paid 25% taxes on that retained profit, but now that I still owe that company 200K, and I spent it all in renovating this property. So initially, this property is worth 1.2 mil, technically. But then when I went back to the bank and I revalued it, I got so this is a year or 2 years later. It was actually 12 months later, I think it was. The bank revalued this property at 1.5 mil. So I spent 200K to fix it, but then they revalued it at 200K, at 1.9 mil. And luckily, because I'm an accountant, they allow me to borrow up to 90%. So technically, remember, my loan on it was only $1 million. So I had a $1 million loan. And now I'm able to borrow 1.3. Because remember, there's a 90, depending on you, let's just say that you had an 80%. Most people have 80%. They go to the bank, they can borrow 80%. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to the videos to watch. But basically, what I did next was I took this money and I borrowed the full amount that I could borrow on top. So I already have $1 million loan. So I technically borrowed another 350K off the bank. I refinanced 350K out of the bank. So the reason why I took this money out is because I still have a Division 7A with the bank, with my company. So I wanted to repay that loan. So what I did is that because I took 200K out, I actually took the $200,000, paid my company back. So therefore, I didn't need to pay the top-up tax. Because if I left it as is, then I'll need to take a dividend in my personal name, and then I'll have to pay the top-up tax. So that's what I did first. Yeah, so I refinanced the 350, took 200K back out of the bank. And remember, I haven't sold this property at all. And even if I did, it was my home, so it's tax free. I generated value using this property, and I borrowed funds on the business to be able to borrow to invest. And while that was happening, I paid the business back and then I got rid of this Division 7A. So this is kind of like a strategy I did to buy my first home, and it can be done through investment as well. So there are some factors in this. One is that I did have retained profits, and then I was making profits of about 200K. I didn't do the deposit, but you can put down a 10 to 20% deposit depending on what the banks offer to you. But for me, I put down 0% basically because I wanted to do that. You don't need to refinance the money out as well. I refinanced that because I didn't want to pay a dividend to my personal name to cancel out the Division 7A. So it's like I used my business profits and I was able to pay it back within 1 year. So as a result, I didn't have to deal with the interest, didn't have to deal with the extra taxes that I need to pay. And I now have a property of 1.5 mil and with a loan of 1.3. And yes, I'm repaying these, but then I also have, how much was it again? 350K in cash, 200K sitting in the bank of the company, and another 150K sitting in my offset account. Let me just answer a few questions, then I'll tell you what I did next. Okay, so regarding not investing in your personal name, what if you add leverage to your personal name? If you have capital and income portion, you can grow the capital, not pay CGT until sale and get negative. But yeah, so negative gearing benefits is a good idea in your personal name. So I do buy, like I said, I do have assets in my personal name. I usually have a rule where I buy 1 or 2 assets in my personal name, and then I'll start buying in a bucket company. I'm not a big fan of negative gearing that much because when you have a business like this, you have the ability to pay yourself less. So you can just not pay yourself wages, and you can then generate the whole negative gearing factor as well. So like I don't really care too much about negative gearing. Negative gearing is a big deal for high income earners that can't change their income, or like medical professionals that can't keep their profits in the company. The best tax rate for you is the company, which is 25%, or SMSF at 15%. What we do is we'll try to keep our taxes at 25 to 30% in our personal name. So if we can do that, like effective tax in your personal name, it's better than negative gearing. Yeah, because negative gearing is the only reason why you like negative gearing is because you're trying to reduce the tax you're paying on 47% and getting it lower so you get a tax refund. Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of negative gearing when I'm running a business. If you're a individual earning income as an employee and your income is like at 200K, 300K, or you're like a medical profession where you can't split your income, then negative gearing is amazing. And you also asked, does the loan that you pay back to the business become tax deductible? Technically, yeah. So if I didn't pay the loan back and there's a Division 7A loan, the interest I charge from the company to the individual could be tax deductible if the property wasn't my home. So if the property was an investment property, then technically I can claim the interest on Division 7A. So that's actually a strategy that some people do. Buyers agents, property experts, they all do this. They generate income from their buyer's agent business. And then what they do is they generate all this income, they draw the money out, buy in the personal name or buy in other entities. And what they do is they charge a Division 7A interest against the company to the individual. What would happen then is they get to claim the interest because the property they're buying is an investment property. And so therefore, they don't pay too much tax on the property, on their rental income. It's a trick they do. And then eventually they may refinance and they might just, instead of putting it back into the company, they just buy more properties. They just buy more and then they just charge interest through the company. And then eventually they sell some of them, pay the taxes, pay down the loans, and then they buy a commercial property because it has high rental yield. And they do this strategy here where they just invest using a bucket company, SMSF, and the individual with high rental yield, and they live off that rental yield. Yeah. So the last thing is what I did next is the cool thing. Remember when I said to you guys that, see how I like in when I was 30, I used to think, oh my God, man, I'm 30 now. Only just bought my home. And now I'm in like 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 it's not even like $1 million in net assets. It's actually less than $1 million when you take up the loan that offsets the asset itself. So I didn't feel like I was that rich or I even did anything. I worked like for 15 years, 10 years of my life, and I still only just managed to buy myself a first home. But it's crazy in the next 3 years what I did, because in the next year I bought a commercial property and then I bought my second home. Okay, so how did I buy commercial property straight away? So remember when I told you that I took that money out and paid back the business? So during the next next year, my business was still growing. And like I said before, when you're doing this, you need a profit, a generating business that generates cash flow. So as long as you generate cash flow, which is like here in your business, your retained profits is gonna be sitting not at 200K anymore. Could be sitting at 500K, and at that time it was quite high. Like I started generating enough profits, and I paid the 200K back to the company, and now I have like so much money that equity, what they call it, to be able to purchase assets. And I then decided that because my business is growing, I needed a place, I needed a location, and luckily, a property that was right next to where my office was up for sale. So I went there and I just said, okay, let's buy a property. So I set up a bucket company. Okay, so I didn't exactly did this, but this would have been something I did. I rushed into it. So what I would say is take that 500K, set up a bucket company, lend that $500,000 over to here. Now you got a 500K in cash here, and then go to the bank and buy a commercial property. So I went to the bank, bought the commercial property for say again, rough numbers and not exactly true. So say it was 1.5 mil, just doing this for argument's sake, so it's just easy to explain. So 1.5 mil, whoop. Yep. And then and put down 500K, so I borrowed $1 million. And now I've got this bucket company that owns the commercial property. Okay. So the reason why I set up a bucket company is because there's no Division 7A issues between just lending money from this company over to this company. They have very similar tax rates. So this is 25%, this is 30%. And the rules are with the ATO is that because you're lending between company to company, there is no like top-up tax you need to pay. So it's actually better to use a bucket company. Yes, you lose the, the 12-month 50% discount. But I like the fact that it was in a bucket company. And when I pay myself profits over to this bucket company, rental income. So this company then now has to pay rent to this bucket company because it's renting the business premises. It's capped at 30%. Yeah. So generating all this income. And then the goal is, I bought the commercial property. And what happened after is I borrowed $1 million. So remember, the issue with your business, with this whole investment journey, is there are three things you need to think about. One is you need to have equity. So you need to have money, cash for deposit. So as you notice that every time I purchased an asset, I had cash, right? I had some sort of cash sitting in a property, sitting in a bank account, or sitting in my business. In order for the banks to lend you money, they need to make sure that they can that you can pay off the loan if you sell the property, as well as have extra cash to do the deal. So as a result, I tried to rinse and repeat the money that I originally had. So I did the same with the 500K. That 500K was a result of my retained profits, which I used to leverage and buy this property. And then I took it back, put it back into this company, and then transferred it over to another company to purchase the asset. And so I was left with 500K. So, and then the next step after doing that is that now this loan, I have a loan of 1 mil. I have a loan here for say 1.3. So the total amount of loans I have was 2.3 mil. All right. And if you did the deep dive with me before, is that you can borrow money and you can cancel out this loan as long as this entity is profitable and can service its own debts. So because this trading company is paying for this bucket company and it's a $1 million loan, I was paying rent to this bucket company 60K to 80K. And as a result, this was servicing the loan itself and it was profitable. And so basically, when I went to the bank to borrow money, they only took in consideration I only had 1.3 mil in loans. Okay, so this is a bit complicated, but if you study the other deep dives, you understand what I'm talking about. So basically, what happened was that the banks ignored the fact that I had this loan, and they only saw that I only had a loan of 1.3 mil. And remember, at the very start of this conversation, I said to you guys that I wasn't very comfortable with the fact that if I were to do this again, I probably would have just rented and bought my family home later on down the track, because now this family home causes a bit of issues for me in terms of borrowing capacity. And over time, this is like, how long has it been? So now it's like my 31 business has been around for quite some time. It's been, I think, 6 to 5 years in. My business is a lot more profitable. So I ripped the 500K out of this business and left it in here. But after a year or 2 years, I started generating another more profits. Can't remember exactly how much I had, maybe 350K. And then, I think in year 33, so 2 years later, I generated enough cash flow, retained profits, and I then took that money out and bought the second property. All right, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just finding this cash cow business, generating enough cash, and then buying more assets with it and being able to borrow more. So this time around, I'm kind of stuck now. My trading company is generating, say, 500K in profits. Again, this is made up. It's not true. But basically, I'm generating 500K in profit on an annual basis. And I'm servicing this loan here, which is my home. I'm then servicing a second property that I purchased as well. And say that I purchased this property for $2 million. I've got like $4 million in $3 million in loans personally or in other entities, and I also have a commercial property with a $1 million loan too. So I'm kind of like got too many loans, too many repayments I need to make. But the great thing is this is positive, and the great thing about this is that I've had an increase in the capital growth of this property. And this second property, I'm doing my best to knock it down, develop and increase the value, while my business is still growing and generating income for me to be able to purchase more assets. So the one thing that I have a problem right now is borrowing capacity. I can't borrow anymore because the banks are saying to me, Davie, you make $500,000 now, so 500K. And the biggest issue that I have right now is that if I were to borrow, I was at an extra 0 6 times, I only can borrow 3 mil. And have you guys noticed, I'm kind of capped, 1.3, bought a $2 million property. So if I say I borrowed 1.6 mil, if I do this plus this, which is my current loan, I'm up my capacity right now. I'm up to a certain point where I can't borrow anymore. So what am I going to do? So what I've just decided to do was I wanted to restructure the property into SMSF, this commercial property. So I decided that I'm going to move this commercial property into SMSF, which then means that we get to value the property again. It might be worth $2 million, for example. I set up an SMSF. The SMSF will buy this commercial property off this bucket company. Then it will release cash back to me. And I'll use that cash. Remember, I had 500K cash sitting in this bucket company that I had to put down for a deposit. So now that the bank will lend me, will pay for this 1.5 mil property, will probably pay on top because the value has gone up. Say they pay 1.8 mil. And so how much cash would I have? I'll have that minus this, which is 300K, plus that 500K that I initially put into the commercial property. So technically, I will have about 800K. So I'll use that 800K now, put it back into my personal name or into the bucket company, and then buy my third property. And this is how I've just restructured the investments. And that's what you need to do in the next steps of your investment journey. Sometimes you just need to get the asset in and get the return on investment through growth, and then restructure, use your SMSF to be able to borrow or use other entities, other structures to be able to borrow and get it in or sell some assets to be able to release equity for you to find your next property. And the whole point of what I'm doing right now is I moved that commercial property here, which is what I was planning from the very start. If you guys came late, I think some of you guys came late, but I was trying to have a commercial property here and have investments properties in here and also ETFs and crypto. And I just haven't done ETFs and crypto that much yet because my goal is to use leverage to maximize my growth. But that's like the game plan of having investments here and investments here that are taxed at 15% and 30% and keep all the profits here until I decide that when I'm 40 or onwards where I want to take the money, I don't need to rely on this cash flow business anymore. And now I can slowly close this down or sell it. And then what would happen is I have no more income. And so I have to generate the income from or pull the income out of this bucket company. Yeah, so that's a game plan. Any questions? Let me just quickly check. Did you do the numbers on stamp duty transfer cost or did you work out rough BEP, break-even point? Oh yeah, I didn't really, like the stamp duty was just an extra cost that I took in consideration and I took it out of the equity that I had or the cash that I put down as a deposit. So I just paid the stamp duty cost. I added it in on the cost value. So when I bought it for $2 million, it was like $2 million plus the stamp duty. Yeah, and I used cash to pay for it or got the bank to borrow. I added it to the loan. That's how I did it. But yes, the numbers I gave you guys were just rough numbers. They weren't even like true numbers of how much my business was making or how much cash flow I had and how much I used to buy the assets. But this is basically kind of like what I did. But the main goal for me is to have more my assets in here and SMSFC. And I'm an accountant by trade. I'm not an investor by trade. But I've started to realize over time is that residential property is great for capital growth, but it's not that great for rental yield. And if you pay off the loans, eventually all the residential property that you have in here, say you have like $5 million and you got a rental yield of only 2% or 3%, say 3%, you're only getting 150. But if that 5 mil that's a net asset for 5 mil and it's like a commercial property, you could get 5%, and that's an extra $100,000 more. So I've noticed that a lot of our clients that are investors, they decide to sell their residential properties and buy a big commercial property for 5 mil with a high rate of rental yield, and then they just live off the 250K or something like that, with a higher rental yield. And sometimes they try to move commercial properties here too. So like for me, my goal is to move the commercial property in here, but also maybe one day I'll sell the residential properties and buy commercial properties in the bucket company instead. And it's getting taxed at 30%. And remember, a lot of people would just go, oh, I'm paying 30%. That's a lot of taxes. But if I decide to retire and I get rid of the business and pay off all the bank loans, and then I have my own personal name here, I don't generate any income anymore. So when I'm like 40 to 60 years old, the income I'm generating is zero. So what's my tax rate? 0%. So if I were to pay myself like, 100K a year, and this is including the franking credits and all that gibberish, and I pay myself like say 100K, like my effective tax rate is 23%. And what's that? That's lower than the fully franked dividend. So if I did the fully franked dividend and the dividend is at 30%, technically I'm getting refunds every time if I pay myself 100K fully franked dividend from this bucket company, and I pay my wife a fully franked dividend of 100K. So I've got 200K minus the taxes. Then technically the dividend's going to cover, the franking credit's going to cover my taxes. So I don't need to pay any extra taxes on top. So I just live off this for the next, 10, 15, 20 years from this, as long as my bucket company's got an investment that generates like rental income and, is growing at a very fast rate. Or no, not at a fast rate, at a slow rate. And then once I get to 60, I can then start taking money out of the SMSF as well. And that's how I think my retirement game plan is. And I've already started it, which is good. Like I wouldn't say I'm halfway there, but I'm not saying that like everything I'm telling you is like it's all happening already. Most of it is, but that's my game plan. Like I think I will need a few more properties in my bucket company, I'll need a few more investments. I shouldn't just have property, because ETFs and shares make an average of 8 to 9%, which are amazing, and also pay you dividends. And property does, right now 7%, but it might not. Like, it just depends. And then crypto, I don't know if anyone wants to do research on crypto, but the last 5 years, I think it's gone up like 100%. Yeah, so it really depends. But it also could go down like, 80% as well, or 100%. So got to be careful with crypto. But yeah, my game plan is to diversify my income, and then eventually the business I have, I'll probably most likely like wind it down or settle it down to the employees and let them run it as well. That's it. That's my game plan of being able to retire, and I hope it all makes sense. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out.